Today I need to ask you guys what happened with the Backrooms. Like, seriously, what happened? It went from something that could easily be talked about to an annoyance to many within the online horror community. I remember a year ago, people were excited and extremely interested in the Backrooms, as it was something new and there was so much being added to it that made it work. And all the new locations made things feel very expansive, and that this universe could go on forever and showed an infinitely creative space for many more horror stories that could come on along the way. These spaces like this for horror have existed before, such as creepypastas, but most besides the SCP Foundation have faded into past memories. And why is that? Well, to answer that question I throw you one word: oversaturation. So what is oversaturation, you may be asking? Well, oversaturation is the overdoing of a certain subject to the point that it becomes stale and unliked. One of the most recent examples of oversaturation I can think of right at this moment is the video game Among Us. See, Among Us during quarantine was a smash hit, which brought a lot of people together during a time when none of us could really go and see each other because of quarantine. But when I say Among Us got popular, I mean it got really popular. Overnight the game became a smash hit, and it became a YouTube sensation, rapidly growing and growing, and people began making their whole careers just off of Among Us content. But see, with massive growth like that, the hype of the game would eventually die down, with the game being updated really slowly, which eventually caused people to grow tired of the game as a whole. Therefore, the market of Among Us content and similar things about it became extremely oversaturated, and people got extremely bored of it, and it eventually just died out completely. So you may be asking, how does this all relate to the Backrooms as a whole? Well, see, it follows the same pattern of other horror markets that came before it, such as what Among Us did. These horror markets progressively get even more oversaturated and ruined by people adding on to it and making the ideas of the stories become progressively less and less scary. But before explaining any further, please remember to like and subscribe on the video and comment down below what you think of the video, and if you liked it, please let me know. Now let's start from the very beginning of the Backrooms as a whole. The Backrooms started as a small story on 4chan of all places, which I find frankly hilarious, as one of the biggest horror phenomenons of the past decade originated on 4chan of all places. But the original Backrooms story read this:
if you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the back rooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum humbuzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because this sure as hell has heard you.
This really short and somewhat goofy idea wouldn't see much traction for a couple of years, till slowly it started getting quite a big following, especially with the idea of liminal spaces becoming extremely popular over time. See, a lot of subreddits would be posting these images called liminal spaces, especially with subreddits like the Cursed Images subreddit. See, subreddits like Cursed Images would usually post images of extremely wide and creepy spaces that people would just find somewhat unsettling. And the horror from this was mainly just from how vast and empty these spaces were, as they were kind of creepy and they just played off the fear of the unknown that people have. And these started to gain traction because the spaces seemed to connect with something primal in people, a seemingly strong fear of these vast empty spaces. So people started to add stories into it that went with the theme of the original Backrooms post. And this would lead the idea of the Backrooms to start to blow up as people started to add more and more stories onto this original, somewhat creepy idea. And each one of these levels drew extreme inspiration from the SCP Foundation, as the creatures and levels were often heavily detailed, with some being more dangerous than others. For example, there's the most popular level, which is Level 0. Level 0 is described this way. Level 0 is an expansive non-Euclidean space resembling the back rooms of a commercial building. All rooms in Level 0 share the same superficial features, such as the worn yellow wallpaper, old moist carpet, and scattered electrical outlets and inconsistently placed fluorescent lighting. Aside from these common features, no two rooms within the level are identical in layout. That short little description would be what built the Backrooms as a whole, as people started to add on more and more to this idea. And these new levels came at an extremely rapid pace. More levels started to get added on as this idea started to grow more and more, as people came up with more things to add on to it. And with these new levels, a new heavy backstory started to be added on, and a continuity started being added to the Backrooms, with things such as outposts and the creation of organizations like the Major Explorers Group, or also known as MIG. This allowed people to keep up a continuity and add on even more to the backstory and add ideas to the Backrooms as a whole. It also allowed the space posts to be continually fresh and full of new ideas, allowing a lot of people to not become bored of the idea, which communities like the creepypasta community had fallen into years ago. As with creepypastas, people kind of got bored of them. Most of the ideas started to play off of each other, and the ideas became less and less original as time went along, so the ideas got boring over time as more and more things started to get popular. More clones of the popular ideas came along. However, while the Backrooms originally started off as a somewhat small community on things like Reddit and 4chan, this would completely change. As on January 7th, 2022, Kane Pixels, a relatively unknown YouTuber at the time, decided to release his own version of the Backrooms, which was called the Backrooms Found Footage. And what seemed like a small video would blow up overnight, and here's some footage from it to show how just effective this was at the time.
What the hell? Holy shit. What the fuck is this place? This isn't real. This isn't real.
This video changed everything. It put the Backrooms in the limelight to an extreme. Everyone knew what the Backrooms was at this time, and this would show as even more new levels were being added and animations and fan animations were being created every minute due to the extreme popularity of the idea of the Backrooms. Like seriously, there was a whole marketplace on YouTube just on Backrooms content, as YouTube Shorts allowed things like Backrooms animations just to blow up extremely well. And it seemed like everyone and everything was obsessed with the Backrooms at this time, as almost everyone was covering it, as it was just a huge idea, and it still pretty much is. It's just not anywhere near as huge as it used to be. But you may be asking, why is that level of popularity just keep going down when that thing used to be just so popular? But while things get less popular over time, that's just a common fact. This, I think, had a little bit more to do with something else. See, this level of popularity usually will bring one thing with it, and that, of course, being people who aren't as skillful at their craft, to put it lightly. See, when it got as popular as it got, quality control on all the new levels started to drop rapidly, with poor quality monsters and levels being created, with many of the new ones being blatant rip-offs of already popular levels or levels that just add nothing to the horror of these spaces. See, what people would do is they would literally just find any liminal space online and just add on a little story to it, and it didn't matter how good it was, and they would post it to a Backrooms subreddit and it would be considered added to the lore. And speaking of the lore, the other problem that the Backrooms began to face was the overcomplication of lore, something that would eventually remove all the horror of the situation in the first place. See, horror is all about the art of subtlety. The more you explain of the horror, the less scary something becomes. That's just common knowledge, and it's just playing off the fear of the unknown. If you don't do that, the thing becomes less scary over time. And you can really see this in the Backrooms, because what made the Backrooms just so terrifying in the first place was how simple and eerie the original images were, and just how empty the spaces were. It wasn't filled with these monsters and crazy ideas. It was just a simple empty space that went on for miles. But with all the new monsters, colonies, and companies, the Backrooms began to lose that vast, empty feel to it, and began to feel like something more out of a video game. A lot of the original charm was lost in that, and what made it so special was squandered by poor writing and complicated ideas. This sucks because this problem could have been easily avoided, and I'll show how it could have easily been avoided because it's been done before. See, one of the most popular underbellies of the internet is that of the SCP Foundation. The community has existed forever now, like seriously. This has been around for years and almost decades now. See, the SCP Foundation has always been a somewhat more underground section of the horror community, talked about more in hushed tones than anything else as to not spread it too much. And the ideas on there are still frankly horrifying, with many of the stories on there being some of the most original ideas you can find online. So even though the site became popular, how come it didn't run into the same problems as the Backrooms? Well, see, when the SCP Foundation started to become oversaturated, instead of doing what the Backrooms did and allowing all the bad and poorly written stories to take hold and overpowering the good ones, the SCP Foundation went on full lockdown. See, the SCP Foundation works now as people have to vote on whether or not your story is good enough to even be seen and added as a part of the SCP Foundation. And there's a lot of strict rules that you have to follow to even get your story to be considered to be a part of it. This has led the SCP Foundation to have an extremely high barrier for quality, and making it so that almost no bad stories can get into it, leading to the market staying fresh and creeping out readers for years to come. And I think the Backrooms could have really benefited from this level of quality control, not allowing all these bad eggs and bad stories to come through, like the creepypasta community ended up doing. And that is what I think the Backrooms could have done to fix all of this and actually make it so it stayed relevant for years to come. See, it always would have lost relevancy like things do, but it could have stayed even more relevant than it did if it had kept more niche, if that makes sense. So remember, if you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. And if you liked the video, please let me know down below, and I will truly read your comments, please. And I will hopefully see you guys next week, and have a great week. Goodbye.